This is XMedia's coverage of the U.S. election. This is XMedia's coverage of the U.S.
Hello
election.
and welcome to XMedia's coverage of the U.S. presidential election of 2016. I'm Alicia Pocock.
And I'm James Cunningham. Sorry about the delay, but we were just building suspense.
Man, it's fine because we are back now and we are live for the next 6 hours following every twist and turn of the night as the results come in.
We will have a variety of different panellists on the show for the next 6 hours discussing everything ranging from fascism to feminism concerning the US election.
And so that you don't get bored of our faces, we will be mixing up the presenters every 2 hours as well as bringing you the Roundup room on an hourly basis so you can keep up to date with everything that is going on during this, what is set to be a very long night.
It's arguably one of the most controversial elections in the history of the United States, and all the endless planning, advertising and campaigning has all amounted to this. We are now on the verge of history.
Yes, and the contest for the biggest job in the world ends tonight. Not only is this a huge night for America, but also for the rest of the world, as inevitably the result will be felt right across the globe, and we will be following the whole thing live right here. So I think we probably better get started. We've got a few panellists joining us today.
We do. Unfortunately, although results are not expected until after midnight, 358.com has already previewed that Hillary Clinton maintains a slender lead in the polls by 48.5% compared to Donald Trump's 44.9%. Our panellists tonight include Josh Bendel, Sam Fawcett, Ollie Lunn and Zena Starr.
Hello, hello. And obviously, although this election has blown up massively over the past sort of 3 weeks or so, this has been going on for months, actually, way back in, I think, early as April 2015, where the first candidates announced that they were going to stand. So how have we got to where we are now? What has happened since then? We've got the primaries. How have we ended up with these two candidates? And it's quite a different system to the British one. Josh, how does it work in America?
I believe that so when you've got the system that has to come down to a majority of two, in between two candidates, what's interesting is how we've come to this point is the actual candidates that we have. Throughout the whole election, there's been quite a large rhetoric from the public of anti-establishment, hence why Bernie Sanders was so popular in his primary candidacy, and how we have Donald Trump, who is almost a caricature of anti-establishment, anti-everything really, especially sort of manners. But that's kind of like why we've got to this stage. There's this sense of disenfranchisement from the American people. There's this sense that the government hasn't actually been representing the people, and that a change needs to happen.
Yeah.
So ultimately, whoever wins,
yeah.
A change will happen as part of this historic election.
Change is going to come.
It is indeed. Sam, could you please give us perhaps a little lowdown a little bit on this electoral college system? Because all we know is that out of 538 electoral college votes, a candidate needs 270 to win. Nonetheless, rather than being equally represented, the different states have their different electoral colleges, and the amount of votes that they get is based not on how big the states are, but on how many people inhabit those states. So, Sam, what does this mean, really, for the race?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting system because it basically means, although obviously around 150 million people are voting, kind of like in the UK with first past the post, there's only really 6 or 7 states that really matter because most of them are so solidly Democrat or so solidly Republican. So there's these key states which we need to watch. Also, I think around 6 states are done proportionally. So it's a very complicated system because some are winner takes all, some are proportional. And I know obviously it always causes a lot of controversy because while they are broadly reflective of the population, some have maybe slightly disproportionate than others, and it's always causes some controversy.
And Zena, you're American, kind of American, moved back here when you were 9. But for you, what have been some standout moments of this election? There's been scandal, controversy. What do you think have been like some pivotal moments of both campaigns?
Well, I think one of the most pivotal moments in the election was seeing the rise of the anti-establishment candidates, be it Trump or be it Bernie or be it the reaction that Hillary had to Bernie and becoming almost semi-anti-establishment herself. That has been a turning point. This has been, for me, one of the first elections where you've seen candidates actually directly challenge these systems of government and finance we have in place. However, speaking from my heart, I would say it's been the turn towards feminism.
Right.
The really, whereas in previous elections, we've talked about gender equality, talked about the wages issue, but this one, it's been screamed, partly because we have had a misogynist running as the Republican candidate, and partly because we have a woman who's treated unfairly, because although she has very similar policies to Obama, she is female.
We'll get into the details a little bit later on, but thank you very much for pointing out those key differences. Ollie, you're a Spurs fan, so you're no stranger to, I guess, surprising runs. So how would you describe both candidates' runs so far? How have they both compared?
Well, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, they've massively varied because Hillary Clinton went in as the favourite. Bernie Sanders was her nearest challenger, but no one expected him to be a serious challenge going in. Martin O'Malley was the other guy. And broadly speaking, Martin O'Malley never got above 1% in the polls, but with Bernie Sanders, you're looking at a Jewish socialist from Vermont. The fact that he could get anywhere near the nomination was absolutely extraordinary. On the other hand, Donald Trump came from a position where no one really took him seriously. For the first 3 months that he ran, I think the Huffington Post refused to put articles about him in their politics section. They put it in their comedy section. Wow. No one took him seriously, even though he led the polls. Then he won New Hampshire, but right up until the convention, I don't think people really took him seriously. I don't think people thought he could actually do it. And so the fact that he's here is quite extraordinary.
Indeed, indeed. I think voter turnout also seems to be a key issue in this election because it's going to be so close. And voter turnout in the last election was somewhat over 50%. It was about 53.6%. Nonetheless, of those registered voters, over 80% of those turned up. So quite a few, the majority of registered voters did actually turn up. Can we expect a significant difference?
In regards to the registered voters turning up?
Yeah, or just voter turnout and how that's going to influence the outcome of the election.
Yeah, perhaps because maybe a lack of apathy now because you've got these two candidates that so many people have said that they don't relate to either one.
Exactly, and there has been this rhetoric of the better of two evils, which especially the Hillary campaign has really tried to downplay because Donald Trump has almost owned his evil and said, you know what, I'm evil, but I'm evil for the people. So I think that you will see perhaps there might be a slump in young voters, but we have seen in the past month, especially with the release of the Trump tape, a resurgence in people saying you need to get out there and vote. And there have been a lot of people, you could have done a drive to call for Hillary from your laptop, and a lot of my family have done that. And people have really been going out and trying to not just get people to vote, but to register. And we've seen this every year, but I think this year, this has been particularly significant, so hopefully voter turnout is better.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to pick up on something. Yes, Ollie, you mentioned it. Bernie Sanders, and Josh, you mentioned earlier about this anti-establishment kind of sentiment. Bernie Sanders is obviously kind of an anti-establishment figure as well, and that's kind of goes off in two directions. You've got Trump, and then you've got Bernie Sanders, still kind of arising from the same feelings, but obviously two very extreme views. Do you think that Trump will pick up any of Sanders' voters or people that voted for Sanders?
There has been talk of it. So there's these Bernie bros that they talk about on the internet, which are people who sort of said, well, if we don't get Bernie, then we're going to vote for Donald Trump because the establishment isn't working for us. Ultimately, I don't think there'll be that many people who thought who voted for Bernie Sanders in the primaries who will then go across to vote for Trump because they diverge a great deal on policy. Although they're sort of both quite protectionist and anti-free trade, Bernie Sanders is incredibly progressive, incredibly liberal. Whereas Donald Trump is sort of the antithesis of that. So if you're seriously into your politics and you seriously care about the future of the country, you're not going to have voted for Bernie Sanders in a primary and then gone for Donald Trump, however frustrated you are with the establishment.
Yeah, and Sam, this is kind of something that's sweeping the globe at the moment. We've got Brexit, obviously, UKIP, Front National in France. Do you think that this is kind of a feeling that's being felt across the globe and that's going to only increase should Trump win tonight?
I think we kind of have to look at what happens if Trump loses tonight. Because I don't think he's going to take it lying down. I think he's either going to just vanish for 10 years and then pretend that the whole thing never happened, or he's going to keep talking about how it's rigged, how fraudulent, crooked Hillary, all this kind of stuff. And it really depends where his voters go because we've seen this incredible outpouring of hatred against obviously women, ethnic minorities, Jews, it's really come pouring out. And I don't think even the most frightened of liberal commentators expected quite the magnitude that they've seen. So it all depends if these people, really want to carry on their fight.
Josh, a lot of people have, based on what you've said, Sam, a lot of people have questioned whether the American electoral system is democratic enough. And would the fact that Donald Trump potentially couldn't, or if he does lose, the possibility of him not accepting the result, would that not undermine the system further?
Yeah, and especially to add to what's been commented on about the anti-establishment. But ultimately, you can't say that the system isn't democratic in terms of its entirety. I mean, if you look at the whole system, it is democratic, right? The issue is in applied democracy. I mean, you can have a system in place, but has the information been flowing? Have the people been informed? And has the whole democratic process outside of the
Why is it
systems?
democratic, though? What makes it democratic?
I mean, on a simple basis, by virtue that they've got a vote, but not only that, through the extension of the process, and it's gone back from say, April and through the primaries, it's a very extensive and long process. And not only that, but America's very politicized. It's a very constantly current topic. So in that term, it is democratic. When you look at, for example, registration, so say like 53% of the population turned out, but that was 80% of the registry. You can then look at whether the system is entirely flawed because it's not actually representing the whole population. Ultimately, the question whether it's democratic or not and whether Trump stays and what he says after if he loses, what the actions are after, bear a lot of mind in terms of what the Senate and the legislature need to do to, one, reinvigorate people, and two, re-democratize the states. So in a sense, it's been quite a dark election on a lot of topics. It's been very personal. But what it will do is it will cause change, and hopefully positive change. And that change should come through legislation or through policy changes. So it has been very traumatic, and in terms of the democratic process, it might even be a positive kick Wall Street up their arse, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely. No, I think one of the key things that Donald Trump perhaps is somewhat justified in this is that he could legitimately lose the presidential election, and based on the majority's consent. Because if the majority of voters don't turn up, then he can say, well, look, listen, I'm not representative of the majority of the American people. Zena, is that a plausible remark to make? Would you be comfortable making that remark if you were Donald Trump?
If I were Donald Trump, I think I'd be comfortable saying about anything. But the thing is, for him, this is so much less about politics and so much more about ego. And I think his feelings would be hurt if he lost, and that's why he's saying this right.
Could you not say it about Hillary as well, though?
If
She's attacked him
Hillary-
as much as he's attacked her.
But
in
if she
debates.
loses, she will accept the result. And she has full on said, if I lose, I'm going to be angry about it, but I'm going to accept it. And we have seen elections where actually the popular vote has not gone to the president that won. They won the Electoral College. We've seen it with Bush in 2000, and we saw it with Harrison versus McKinley in 1888. These things do happen, and unfortunately, no democracy is perfect. It's just the best thing we got. And I think that if Trump loses and he does not concede, it doesn't say as much about the system as it does about A, his ego, and B, the Republican Party, which will probably fragment, splinter, and who knows what will happen then. And that would be a very interesting thing to see.
Sorry, Alicia.
I was just going to say, I think we should talk about policies, because this is kind of what it's all about, and it has been overlooked a little bit with all the personalities and the drama and the controversy. So what do you think are kind of the defining policies for both candidates, Ollie?
Well, it's been a real struggle for Hillary Clinton to define herself in terms of a positive message, because obviously she stands for environmental change, she stands for free trade, she stands for a more hawkish foreign policy than you normally associate with Democrat candidates. But she hasn't really defined her message in a way that she'd probably have wanted to at the start of the campaign. The flip side of that is that Donald Trump has framed his message absolutely fantastically. It's a populist, anti-immigration, isolationist message with a bit of trickle-down economics, as Hillary likes to call it, trumped-up trickle-down economics. So what he's done is framed his message, however we disagree with it, he's framed it really effectively. And I think everyone knows exactly what Donald Trump stands for, which I don't know if you could say about Hillary.
What about you, Sam? Have you got...
I think that's a fair comment. I mean, obviously Trump's most famous policy is the wall, obviously. I think what's interesting about, one of the most interesting things about it is, as Ina was saying, how little of a politician he is. Like, effectively, he banged on about this wall, wants to keep Muslims out of the US. Like, all he does is make these kind of throwaway statements.
Wants to get jobs.
Yeah.
Get jobs.
Get jobs. And like most economists on the right, terrified, because he's not got a coherent platform for his economics. Like we've talked a bit about foreign policy. It's purely isolationist, which is why Putin's a big fan. And absolutely, it's been hard for Hillary really to make, because any policy she has announced, within hours, Trump's come out with some ludicrously offensive statement, and that takes the headlines, which is actually a very clever campaign tactic on his part.
I'd actually probably disagree with Ollie in terms of the policy dimensions. if you look at both camps, Trump is populist, but also negative in the sense that he doesn't propose much. What he creates is an atmosphere of terror. Right? He uses fear politics to create this visage that everything's just terrible. That we've got mass immigration, we've got all these issues in the country perpetrated by the Democratic candidates, and so in that sense, he doesn't actually put forward that many actual policies. The whole concept of the wall, I think, is probably not literal, or at least I hope not.
It is important to point out that there is already a wall between the United States.
Yeah.
Get a bigger wall.
But then if you look at the Clinton, her policy is very much a trickle policy. So instead of mass radical change, you've got constant small changes that over time affect larger changes, right? It's kind of like butterfly effect. That's her issue, the fact that she doesn't actually stand for much at the moment because all her policies are slight changes hoping to affect a larger one. So in that sense, you've got two candidates that don't actually stand for much.
You could say Trump, I think, has catchphrases, and Clinton has policies. Trump doesn't really know what he's talking about. If you listen to his debates, like, he genuinely does not have ideas in terms of how to get his opinions into actions. Clinton has ideas, and she has action, but she doesn't have the same kind of outspoken catchphrases that Trump has, and I think that is where she's lost some voters.
I mean, how has Trump got to the stage he is then if he doesn't have ideas? What do you think has compensated for his lack of ideas?
He's a man who's made his money from showbiz.
Yeah.
He's a showbiz man. He's very good at selling things. He could sell the hind legs off a donkey, but that is what's incredibly effective in this sort of 24-hour BuzzFeed culture we have for politics. You don't need serious politics. What you need is good, catchy ideas. We're going to build a wall. We're going to close our borders. That kind of stuff goes down so much better. And in fact, you don't need to have the policies that Hillary has in order to attract voters.
Because that actually reflects the voters. Right? I mean, if we're talking about democratic process, we can criticise on many areas. But the fact of the matter is that Trump speaks for a lot of people, right? And the fact of the matter is that all these people are very angry, but also don't have solutions. And therefore, in that sense, Trump is a perfect representation of how they feel.
I think Trump is the great tragedy of the American people of the modern age.
Quote that, put that on a mug.
Because, but it's so true, because if you think about it, so many of his voters don't have high school diplomas. There has been a huge issue with education, public education in America for decades. You know, I think the most recent failure that comes to mind is Bush's No Child Left Behind policy, which actually left every child behind. Pretty much. And you know what? If you don't educate the public, they're not going to want to look into what Trump is actually saying. They're going to see the headline, be like, yes, I agree, I'm voting. Done. So, in a sense, we've brought this upon ourselves. People they believe in Trump, and it makes sense given that they were not given the tools in which they could be politically informed voters. And it's a tragedy, essentially.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about Trump, and we're going to hear a little bit more about Trump. And he's not had the most conventional path into politics, and we're going to have a little look at it now, just on reports.
Donald Trump's path into politics. In 1946, Donald Trump was born in New York City. He made his first venture into business through his father's company, making great success, but also a couple of failures.
Sorry.
In fact, he's been bankrupt 6 times between 1991 and 2009.
It has not been easy for me, and you know, I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million.
Trump's political allegiance has varied. He was a big fan of Reagan in the 1970s. Then he was a Democrat, even praising Hillary.
I think she's a wonderful woman. I think that she's a little bit misunderstood. You know, Hillary's a very smart woman, very tough woman, that's fine. But she's also a very nice person.
Then he switched back to Republican. He dropped hints before about running in 1988, 2004 and 2012, but never entered.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. If it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
He also tried to gain the Reform Party's presidential nomination with the Reform Party in 1999, but dropped out due to infighting. It's possible that these hints were just meant to act as publicity for his show, Celebrity Apprentice.
You're fired.
Trump announced an official bid for president as part of the Republican Party under the campaign title, Make America Great Again.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
Winning the GOP nomination in July.
And to chat with us about all things Trump, we are joined with our lovely new panel. Here we have Annie Trix, second-year drama student. We have got, who else have we got here? Isabel Taylor sitting on the end there, and we've got Roman, who has a great surname, Christopheru.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, Christopheru, we'll go with that. Roman, you attended a Trump rally when you were in America on your year abroad. Perhaps you can tell us why do so many people love him? Like, what makes him so appealing?
It was mentioned before, and I think it's not so much him. I think it's more not perhaps his policies, but more what he stands for. It's that anti-establishment. It's anti-following the standard political path into the White House. And I think that really appeals to the masses. I'm not going to comment on whether they're right or wrong. I think it's my place to do, but it appeals to those people who feel as if they haven't been represented in previous elections. And I feel, well, it's a feeling that's being spread around the world, really.
Yeah, we were just discussing, we're seeing it everywhere. Like, obviously, with Brexit, and we've got the Front National, it's happening in Poland, Germany.
Absolutely. Spreading. Can you perhaps sympathise with some of the Donald Trump voters? Can you perhaps give our listeners maybe a motive for voting for Donald Trump? What would make someone vote for Donald Trump?
I can. I don't endorse what Donald Trump says, but I can understand, especially when consider the alternatives. I think that's been another massive issue in terms of Donald Trump's rise to fame. I can understand why they would want Trump. I think, especially coming out of crisis back in 2008, and the year's been quite hard. I think that's sort of been like the icing on the cake in terms of people thinking, hey, what do we have to lose in terms of change? Now is the time. Why would we consider not? Yes, it's a risk, and everyone knows it's a risk, and it's a massive gamble, but a lot of these people are thinking, and especially people who's representing, people who perhaps have less education, perhaps don't have as well-paid jobs, they're thinking, what do we have to lose? And I think that's sort of flourished and expanded to the point where we've got Donald Trump fighting against Hillary Clinton tonight.
And Annie, we've just seen kind of Trump's path into politics there, which is kind of not really conventional one. He hasn't actually spent any time at all in the Senate. Is he qualified, or if he's not, then what?
Is he? Oh, I don't know. Is he qualified? I personally don't think he is. When you look at Clinton, for example, who, when she did her speech and she was comparing her history over his, I mean, what has he really done for politics compared to Clinton? I mean, he's owned a lot of businesses, a few golf parks around the world. Like literally, I was reading up on his website, and he was like bragging about all these places he owns, and it's like, I don't care about that.
Do you think what people do, though? Do you think that idea of seeing how he's been successful, says he's a self-made man, or he's like living the American dream? Do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, the American dream, as you said, like being successful, that's what everyone wants. And like, okay, they see this successful man, maybe he can make America successful as well. Yeah. That's what people could be thinking.
I mean, the standard response to that is actually he hasn't really been very successful. He talked about his small loan of $100 million. But $1 million.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it was The Economist looked at it. If he just invested the money that he was given by his father in the stock market, he could have made more than fritting it away for bankruptcies. Actually, could be doing a lot better than he is today.
Nevertheless, is that not what comes with the business? I mean, he's a real estate magnate, I guess, baron, you could call him.
Yeah.
Is that not just part and parcel of the business?
What? Bankruptcies?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, possibly. That's possibly. I mean, it was quite a unique set of circumstances. So when we had, the global financial crisis, I think, that's probably justified that he's not going to have done well, as millions of other people did well. But I think the recurring theme, the fact that it's not just this one-off, it keeps happening. He's had 4 times he's declared for bankruptcy. And then the fact that he's actually used that to not pay income tax for 18 years. He took advantage of declaring essentially a massive loss from his casinos as a way of skiving off tax. And I think that shows that he is A, not a hugely successful businessman, and B, I mean, despite saying, I am successful, I know my way around the tax code, actually, this is a man who is solely for personal gain. And, what does that say about his morals? What does that say about someone that America might elect as president?
And I mean, we've kind of discussed Trump has a lot of money.
Yeah.
What does that say? Does anyone who has money can anyone run for president if they've got enough money? Is that how the system now works?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of worrying if that is the way. It does kind of suggest it, but I mean, hopefully it doesn't come to that.
In terms of fundraising, I think you compare the amount of money that Trump has spent in his campaign and Clinton. I think obviously the Clinton campaign more than doubles what Donald Trump has spent, and I think it's kind of impressive. And I am impressed. There are many things I'm impressed about with what Trump has accomplished, even if I don't agree with him on a lot of things. But for example, super PACs, he's received less than 1% of his fundraising through super PACs, which is total contrast to Clinton, who's like 33%. And so yes. It does help having money. Also, I think it's more than money. I think it's the fame and the celebrity status.
Yeah.
But we can't forget that, yes, he's made a lot of money, but the fact of the matter is Hillary Clinton spent more than double than what he has. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's just down to having money.
Yeah. A lot of other factors.
It's not about the money that means he will be successful. You just need money to enable a presidential run.
Yeah, pretty much. And we sort of were talking about it earlier about kind of what has given rise to this Trumpism. Do you think that it's like this anti-establishment, fed up with the system feeling that has been brewing under the surface for a while, and actually it's just taken someone like Trump to expose that and give it a platform? Or do you think that actually it's Trump himself who is kind of like initiating these extreme views and perpetuating them? Is it like kind of like the chicken and the egg situation?
A little of both.
Yeah.
There's definitely an anti-establishment thread running through this. The past panelists talked about Bernie Sanders. I think there's also a lot of anti-Clinton sentiment. Actually, a lot of people are not voting for Trump because they agree with Trump. Most of the people, I think 538 ran a poll, most of Trump's support actually comes from people who do not want to vote for Clinton. So that's quite interesting, and that's a reflection of just distrust with the establishment. But yeah, I think Trump is very good at mobilizing people who are dissatisfied, fed up, perhaps don't like immigration. So the two feed into each other.
Yeah, 100%. And Trump is kind of, some people compare him to Reagan in that Reagan was kind of a celebrity, although Reagan was someone,
an actor.
He was, but he did have some qualification behind him. What's it called of California? Governor of California. He did that, so he's got a bit more behind him. Do you think you can compare the two? They've also got a very similar slogan, which is interesting.
Make America Great Again.
Yes, I think it's exactly the same. Very original. Well done. Do you think we can compare the two?
I don't really think you can compare what Trump has done now to anything in history.
No.
Obviously, there are similarities, starting with a slogan. But I think the fact that Trump has no experience whatsoever might seem like a disadvantage, but it's actually one of the driving factors behind so many people supporting him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are similarities, but I honestly don't think you can compare, not just in the history of US politics, but in the world, any outsider coming in and stealing the headlines in a way that Donald Trump has done.
Okay, so you wouldn't agree with the statement that it's...
Similarities, but not to the point where I could say they're the same. No.
But do you think that idea of celebrities becoming...
Maybe, potentially. I mean, it's because they're more well-known. I mean, I guess the lesser educated people might be like, oh, I've heard of Donald Trump before, I'm just going to vote for him. Do you know what I mean? Not actually thinking about the politics at all, which is where maybe he is at an advantage in that sense.
And Isabel, what do you think the world will look like if Donald Trump is declared president later?
Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
For one, I don't think the wall will ever be built.
It is already built.
The wall as Trump imagines. There was a really interesting visualization of what it might work. It's going to be something like 21 billion to maintain, and it's just, I mean, the logistics of building it around the mountains are incredible. I think the world will become more inward-looking.
Yeah.
I don't know how much it will affect us in the UK. I suspect Trump is going to be less committed to maintaining the sort of relationship that Hillary Clinton would. And I think it's definitely going to be more volatile because, someone who goes on a 4 a.m. Twitter sort of tweet fest because someone says something that he doesn't like is not going to have particularly stable ideas when it comes to governing. I mean, that said, there are checks and balances. There's Senate should still be Democrat. Congress is going to go for Republican.
Yeah.
But there are mechanisms in place that should limit some of some of the damage, but I would still be pretty worried.
Yeah.
Is the fact that we have two such unpopular candidates and such a personalised, I guess, debate and political climate, does that work in Donald Trump's favour? Can he benefit from this climate? Roman, Annie?
100%.
Yeah, like I said, 100%. We mentioned it before, the fact that Hillary represents the polar opposite of exactly what Donald Trump claimed to be serves perfectly. And I think if we'd had someone like Bernie Sanders in Clinton's place, it could have been a bit different. But I think that Clinton it literally is polar opposites, and that's absolutely worked in Trump's favour. And I don't know, hopefully it won't tonight, but you never know, do we?
And I think something that's really interesting is how a lot of people, obviously not everybody, but a lot of Britain finds Trump quite horrifying and horrible. Has this kind of revealed, obviously, nearly 50% of the American population voting for him? Do you think this has exposed kind of some cultural differences that have previously gone kind of ignored? Do you think this is telling us something here about the differences?
I know, not many, but I know of a few people, maybe friends, students, not close friends, who do support Trump.
Yeah.
And their reasons for doing so, somehow they convince themselves that they are logical. And we have arguments about this, and I don't understand. I think you were talking about this earlier. It comes to do with sort of the basic level of education that some people in America do not have. We were talking before we came on about when you went to the Trump rally, and many people there didn't get any of the irony. And Trump's way of speaking, I wouldn't say debating necessarily, because it's not really debate, it's just wrong, really, really hits home with these people who are have not got that sophisticated level of exploring people's policies, and are going to go for someone who says the things that appeal to them, pretend, well, I don't know, what is it pretend, claims to speak for them. And I'd like to think that most people in the UK can see past falsehoods. And the media is different too. I mean, American media, Fox News is 100% behind Trump, whereas we don't have any media outlets here who actually promote him. We have people who look at him skeptically and expose all the lies, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it does change your opinion of America, or it has of mine. I thought they were a lot more educated to, even consider Trump as, their president. It just, kind of blows a lot of us away. I mean, looking back at their history and how far they've come in civil rights, to go and throw away a lot of that just seems...
For women to vote for him too. It's
insane how far they've come. And to just throw that all away, it's just ridiculous.
But Trump's not the only candidate. There is another one.
Yes,
there is a choice of two, which is good news.
There is indeed. Hillary's path into politics could not have been much different. In fact, she has spent over 30 years in politics, whether it be on, congressional level or in the position of First Lady. Hillary Clinton has fought hard during this election. Margaret Thatcher once said, if you want something done in politics, you ask a woman to do it. Let's see if Hillary Clinton can convince the American people if she can do that tonight.
Hillary Clinton, path into politics. Born in Illinois in 1947, Clinton was raised a Methodist with Republican views, taking an active role in young Republican groups. In 1965, Clinton enrolled in Wellesley College, where she majored in political science. It was here she moved away from her Republican views. In 1969, she delivered a speech at her commencement.
For too long, our leaders have viewed politics as the art of the possible. And the challenge now is to practice politics as the art of making what appears to be impossible possible.
Clinton went on to study at Yale Law School. During her time there, she was recruited by political advisor Ann Wexler to work on the 1970 campaign of Connecticut U.S. Senate candidate Joseph Duffy. Upon graduation from law school, Clinton served as staff attorney for the Children's Defense Fund. In 1974, she returned to Washington as a member of the Presidential Impeachment Inquiry staff during the Watergate scandal. While her husband, Bill Clinton, was re-elected governor of Arkansas in 1982, Hillary maintained her own career working at a local law firm.
One gets the impression that, excuse me, you're really not all that interested possibly in state dinners and teas and garden parties, the kinds of things that we tend to associate with governors' wives.
Well, that's not a true impression. I'm interested in everything. I'm interested in social events and civic events as well as my own professional life. I don't see any reason to be a sort of either-or person.
Her husband became president in 1993. Clinton played a central role in his publicity policy as chair of the Task Force on National Healthcare Reform, though she suffered high levels of opposition and her proposals were abandoned in 1994.
Now, there is something that is not working in the Medicare system to make the delivery of health care to our mothers cost-effective while remaining high quality.
In 2000, she became Senator of New York and won her second term in 2004.
I am honored today to announce my candidacy for the United States Senate from New York.
During her time as First Lady, Clinton was embroiled in many controversies, including the Whitewater scandal and, most famously, the Monica Lewinsky scandal.
I will cooperate in any way possible to resolve this matter. And, you know, I'm not surprised by poll figures like that, given all the accusations and allegations that are swirling around these past days. But I'm going to do what I'm doing here. I'm going to talk with people. I'm going to answer questions. There is no basis of substance to these allegations.
In 2007, Clinton announced she would be running for president, but lost the nomination to Barack Obama.
I announced today that I'm forming a presidential exploratory committee. I'm not just starting a campaign, though. I'm beginning a conversation with you, with America.
From 2009 to 2013, she served under Obama as U.S. Secretary of State.
I have known Hillary Clinton as a friend, a colleague, a source of counsel, and a tough campaign opponent. She possesses an extraordinary intelligence and a remarkable work ethic. I am proud that she will be our next Secretary of State.
In 2015, Clinton announced she would be running for president.
Today about Obama's legacy depends on who wins.
Yeah, it does, because he needs somebody to continue what he's...
And I really think about like a poll just after Martin Luther King's death. Like, look at him. A legend.
Yeah, ledge.
Yeah, what a legend. We're like Martin Luther King legend.
Why isn't she doing that much better than Trump? Why don't?
Because
what's she doing?
that will be like Donald Trump will just scrap everything.
I don't think.
Whereas if
the emails, the affairs, there's lots of things about her that I think alienate the public. She's very establishment. I was speaking to my dad's friend, Parkridge, where she grew up, and he said, if you're happy with the past 8 years of Obama, you're happy to vote for Clinton, but not many people are. A lot of people are angry, and that's why they want Trump, I think. And that's why she's not doing as good as she probably should be, in our eyes.
And even...
Sorry. These emails seem to have been a key feature of, I guess, the key point of criticism that people have voiced against Hillary Clinton. To what extent do you agree with this as a point of criticism, and to what extent is this just, I guess, a bit of hocus pocus?
I think Trump will probably make it very hocus pocus. He'll use anything he can. But she's been in politics for over 30 years. She's very establishment. She was the First Lady. I think she should be very honest. So I don't think what she did was right at all, to use a private server. So I do think there's some backbone to it, but obviously the FBI found there was no criminality. But Trump will obviously use it as much as he can.
And I think even with women, you'd expect first female candidate for president, hooray. But a lot of people, actually 49% of women are actually unfavourable of her. Do you think that she's not doing enough to reach out for women, or is she not including all women on the spectrum? What's she doing wrong here? Because you would have thought she would be more popular amongst women, even though we don't vote according to gender. But she's doing something wrong there.
I guess you could say there is a certain amount of complacency on the side that she is the first female presidential candidate, so you would assume that women voters are going to vote for the first female presidential candidate. I think the fact that she does represent the norm in America. She represents the kind of America that's been happening for the past decade. And yeah, if people are happy with, as you say, if people are happy with how it's been, they're going to vote. I think that kind of overrides the gender aspect.
She's kind of you're saying about change and things like that. She's kind of the establishment figure. Is she too establishment? Can you be too establishment?
I think that people massively underestimate the fact that although she is establishment, this would still be a massive landmark. It'd be a massive change. It'd be the first woman to be president of the United States. I think there's a lot of talk. She has been in the establishment for 30 years. She spent 8 years in the White House. She's been a senator. But this would still mark a massive step in the right direction. So yeah, I mean, although she is establishment in every respect, in a way it would be a massive step. It would be a massive step, I think, for the United States. And I'm returning to why she hasn't got a lot of support. I think part of that comes down to the fact that there is a degree of misogyny even amongst women in the United States. There's a feeling that she's not up to the job. And part of that is because she's perceived to be weak. And the Bill Clinton thing, I don't think, helps her at all. But broadly speaking, I think, yeah, that's the reason that she's not supported, because there is an element of misogyny, sexism, and the view that a woman can't do the top job even now.
There is a kind of the view, I guess, that her, rightly or wrongly, the view that her husband's been president, and despite all her achievements, all her qualifications, there will be a lot of people who will be thinking, oh, her husband's been president, it's easier for her to get in there. So.
And even she herself ran against Obama in the primaries and she lost. Do you think it's a good idea for her to run again? Is that a sign that people don't want her? Should she have kind of learnt the lesson? What do we think?
I think it's difficult to take too much from that campaign against Obama, because Obama was a phenomenon in and of himself. I think Obama could have run against almost anybody in 2008 and probably still won. I think the fact that she's on the verge of becoming president shows that it was a good decision for her to run again. I think she'll be incredibly effective. She's worked her whole life virtually towards this end. And so I think that you can write the 2008 defeat off to an extent on the basis of the fact that I think she will be elected tonight, and then she'll have 4 years to enact policies that she's been thinking about for decades.
I also think that with the affair, a lot of women felt alienated by her. Not much girl power was shown. She was quite quiet on it. So maybe she could use this now to show that she does stand for women. And I know that her mother had a very troubled childhood. And so from a very young age, Hillary felt very passionately about women's rights and children's rights. And it's a shame that the affair set her back in the eyes of the American woman. So hopefully she can use this to get ahead again in their eyes.
I mean, she's been criticised quite heavily. Her main kind of critique is that she is dishonest, as you mentioned earlier. I mean,
does the fact that she was Secretary of State during President Obama's first reign, from 2008 till 2012, and President Obama had quite a mixed, mixed agenda and mixed record when it came to not just domestic policy but foreign policy as well, and the fact that she takes some of the responsibility for that, does that hinder her in some ways, Hannah?
I think in that she is seen as a continuation of what's been happening. I think that's something I read. Like, if you're happy with how things have gone, and you're in a stable job, your kids are going to high school, your family's sort of secure, and you're happy with how America's going, you would vote for a continuation of that system. But if you are in a really poor area, you've not got a job, there's no jobs available, there's no prospects for your kids, like, you're going to vote for something to change drastically. That's the kind of mindset that a lot of people had in the UK's Brexit vote. Why would you vote for the norm when the norm isn't working for you? So I think that vote against the norm is probably, I've lost track of what the original question was now. But
No. Ollie, should she have run again? Is it fair to allow her to run again, despite the fact that she lost the first time? Lots of experts are saying that she probably would have lost against any other candidate than Donald Trump. Should she have run again?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd like to touch on the thing you were discussing with Secretary of State, which is a fantastically difficult job that she took on and did on the whole very well. The issue of being Secretary of State is like being Home Secretary in the UK. You do 1,000 things a day, and the only things that get picked up are on the negative things you do. So for her, that was emails and it was Benghazi. And those are the two scandals that have dogged her. As I've said previously, I think that she was absolutely right to run. The fact that she's going to win the election is indicative of that. She'll take a massive mandate with her into office. And she would have won probably by 10 points if it wasn't for the fact that she was indicted falsely again by the FBI for her emails a couple of days ago. That brought her poll numbers right back down, but that has now been thrown away. So, I mean, yeah, absolutely. There was no question that she was right to run again.
I'm quite certain there that Clinton's going to win tonight. What makes you so sure?
I just think she will. I don't think there's a clear path for Donald Trump to the 270 electoral votes.
You've thought about this?
Yeah, so he has to win Florida, he has to win Nevada, he has to win North Carolina. I don't think he'll win all of them. The polls show her 3 points up. And everyone says, well, the polls got it wrong for Brexit, but I think that's a misunderstanding of the system, because polling in the United States is totally different to how it is in the UK. There's so much more money in it. It's so much better organised. And so you're not going to get an upset like you got for Brexit. And the early voting tends to agree with that sentiment.
I mean, also, I think what's quite interesting about Hillary's campaign, she's got far more budget behind her campaign. Lots more money has gone into it. 72% of it has been from donors, so that's corporations, banks, law firms. Some people say her hands are tied because she's in the pocket of the corporations and the banks. Do you think that's true? There's weight to that argument, and that's...
I think the donations is definitely something to look at. Wall Street donated millions and millions and millions, but also some donations came to her that you wouldn't have expected. So Big Biz, for example, always donate to the Republicans, but this time they donated to Hillary, the Democrats. So I think it's showing that America, certainly the rich, want her in. Obviously they would. And I think that's definitely worth noting. Trump is very self-funded, very self a lot of things, but the fact that she has so many donations probably speaks volumes about her popularity.
I think it's also important to, I guess, realise the fact that the Democratic Party is also fractured, and there were a lot of Democrats who were very disappointed with Hillary Clinton being their candidate. To what extent do you think that this could hinder her in terms of not just those Democrat voters, as we discussed earlier in the show, voting potentially for Trump, but of those Democrat voters not turning up at all, and thus allowing the Trump vote to become all that more significant? Hannah.
Oh, gosh. You always give me the questions I don't have any answers to.
That's okay. I mean,
I think we should talk policy. I think we should go for a standout policy, Clinton's policies, which is what we're going to talk about later, but one that stands out for you, a defining one, each of you.
Absolutely.
Or not a policy, an idea.
I would say climate change is a massive thing. It's something that people haven't talked about a lot in this election at all. Hillary acknowledges that climate change is a thing, which is
Trump doesn't much.
She has massive plans for America's, like the growth of renewable energy, massive plans for the number of solar panels that are going to be on buildings in America. That is something that people across the world kind of looking to America to kind of be a leader in, and I think that is, it's a shame that it hasn't been covered more in the election, really. They've had debates where we talked about emails, we talked about Trump's comments to and it's just, something that's been completely overlooked, really.
Yeah.
With regards to policy, it is important to note also that Hillary Clinton will keep the United States in the Paris Peace Agreement, which Donald Trump has said that he will pull them out. So that is quite an interesting point to make as well. Now, with so much distortion with regards to, I guess, the personalised nature of these debates and of these candidates fully.
It's sometimes hard to know exactly what the actual policies are.
I know, exactly. I get confused myself.
But I think we've got a VT for that, so I think we should roll it now and have a little look. What do they actually stand for? Trump versus Clinton. The policies. Let's start with economic policy and take a look at the proposed tax plans of both candidates.
We're getting rid of carried interest provisions. I'm lowering taxes, actually, because I think it's so important for corporations, because bringing the tax rate down from 35% to 15%. We're cutting taxes for the middle class.
He'll be reducing the number of tax brackets from the current 7 to just 3, as well as slashing corporation tax by more than half. Clinton will add a further tax bracket for those earning over $5 million.
Nobody who makes less than $250,000 a year, and that's the vast majority of Americans, as you know, will have their taxes raised, because I think we've got to go where the money is, and the money is with people who've taken advantage of every single break in the tax code. And we're going to make sure that nobody, no corporation and no individual can get away without paying his fair share.
Moving on to healthcare, here is what Mr. Trump had to say about Obamacare.
It is a disastrous plan, and it has to be repealed and replaced.
You also said you want to make coverage accessible for people with pre-existing conditions. How do you force insurance companies to do that if you're no longer mandating that every American get insurance?
You're going to have plans.
What does that mean?
Well, I'll tell you what it means. You're going to have plans that are so good because we're going to have so much competition in the insurance industry once we break out.
Trump would abolish the current legislation that states that health insurance cannot be sold across state borders, arguing that this would increase competition and lower prices.
We just rip it up and throw it away. What Donald's not telling you is we just turn it back to the insurance companies the way it used to be. Let's fix what's broken about it, but let's not throw it away.
Hillary will also introduce healthcare tax credits and pledges to improve and expand on the current Medicare. As crisis stretches across the globe, a sound foreign policy remains a key part of both campaigns.
These are terrible people in ISIS, not masterminds, and we have to change it from every standpoint.
I would bomb the shit out of them. And one thing I have to say, I don't like Assad at all, but Assad is killing ISIS. And improved relations with Russia from a position of strength only is possible, absolutely. Another one powerful is the worst deal I think I've ever seen negotiated that you started as the Iran deal.
Trump also declares that he will designate China as a currency manipulator for their dumping of exports and devaluation of the currency. And he has threatened the Chinese with a 45% trade tariff should he become president. Hillary plans to reinforce US alliances with Asian states to act as a counterweight to China.
We've had some very tough dealings with one another. And I know that he's someone that you have to continue to break the group's momentum, and then it's back. Our goal is not to deter or contain ISIS, but to defeat. So I would go to the negotiating table with more leverage than we have now. But I do support the effort to investigate for crimes, war crimes committed by the Syrians and the Russians and try to hold them accountable. So when I was Secretary of State, advocated, and I advocate today, a no-fly zone and safe zone.
She has also said that should she become president, she would be committed to leading an investigation into the war crimes committed in Syria. Nothing has divided the candidates quite as much on this campaign as the subject of immigration.
We're going to build the wall. We have no choice. We have no choice. We're going to build a wall. It's going to be a real wall. It's going to be a wall that's powerful and that people aren't going to be going under or up or around or anything. We're going to get rid of the bad ones because we have some really bad ones in here right now, and you know that, gang members in LA.
He will also put an end to birthright citizenship as well as shutting down sanctuary cities across the US.
I have been for border security for years. I voted for border security in the United States Senate. So I think we are both a nation of immigrants and we are a nation of laws, and that we can act accordingly, and that's why I'm introducing comprehensive immigration reform within the first 100 days with a path to citizenship.
And climate change, declared by the CIA as a national security problem, it means it's worthwhile hearing what the candidates' views are on the situation.
I think it's ridiculous. We have bigger problems right now. And
Donald thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real.
I did not.
Hillary is referring to Trump's infamous tweet of 2014.
We can deploy 500 million more solar panels. We can have enough clean energy to power every home. We can build a new modern electric grid. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of new economic activity.
And on gun control.
I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the NRA.
He also wishes to abolish gun-free zones and pledges to fix the broken mental health system that so many mass murders stem from.
I think we need comprehensive background checks, need to close the online loophole, close the gun show loophole.
She also vows to challenge gun lobbyists and to keep the guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, criminals and the severely mental ill. And there you have it, a quick overview of what both candidates stand for and what both candidates pledge to do should they be declared the President of the United States later tonight. 8 years ago, history was made as the first black president rode into the White House on a tidal wave of optimism, vowing to fix a broken America. When Obama officially leaves the White House in January, what will his legacy be?
We are once again joined by a fantastic panel, including all Xpression members, Georgia Darby, George Robinson and Marie Suna. Hello and good evening and welcome to the panel. So, first of all, I'd just like to ask, Georgia, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, okay.
Don't be too random. What will President Obama be remembered for? What do you think his legacy will predominantly consist of?
I think it's going to be mixed. I think he's done a lot of good, which hopefully, if Hillary wins, will be continued. I think in the kind of long term, I hope that it will be it will be more symbolic, I think, probably more than pragmatic. I think the fact that he is the first black president, he's a minority, he's from more of a difficult background compared to the majority of past presidents that America have had. I think he's going to have more of a symbolic legacy than anything else.
I mean, nonetheless, George, we had Obama last time, but this time we only had one other African-American candidate, and that was Ben Carson running for the Republican Party. Why is this? Why do you think there's been this, I guess, mass exodus of African-Americans who want to run for president?
It's a really good question, and I can't say I know, but I mean, I think Barack Obama has done a lot to sort of break the glass ceiling and get there. And I think looking forward, he will go down in history, and it is a great thing he's achieved. But we've seen really there's still problems with sort of the racial problems within America. So although he has broken that glass ceiling, and it is a great thing he's achieved, really has it done much for black people in America? You could say no, because there's still so many problems.
And what do you think, Marie, his key achievements have been during his administration? Pinpoints them.
Well, obviously, there was this huge expectation for great change when he was elected. And a lot of people now feel like he's disappointed. He's not met these expectations, but I do feel like he has changed a lot. He has had more quiet revolutions, maybe than we have expected, but he has changed the way America deals with healthcare. He has changed the way America deals with education. He has changed the way America deals with climate change. So I think domestically there has been a lot of positive, incremental change that has been maybe more complex than some people have expected, and that's why it masked the sort of great change idea that many people were expecting. So I think really his strengths lie in his domestic policies that he passed, and in terms of foreign policy, I think one of his greatest achievements was changing the way America was viewed on the international stage. When he became president, internationally, America was seen as this sort of rogue nation going against the wills of its allies, going against international law, and he brought this huge tide of enthusiasm. He had a huge international following. There were millions of people listening to him speak in Berlin, for example. So in that sense, I think one of his greatest achievements on an international stage has been changing the mood towards America.
I mean, do you think that Trump has now reversed that, everything that's been done by Obama, would you say?
Well, Trump is not president yet.
He's
so
not, but he's been quite a high-profile candidate in this campaign.
Yeah, obviously Trump has been a huge blow to that achievement. Yeah. But I think if Hillary becomes president, she will be able to sort of hopefully continue on that wave. It depends on multiple factors, obviously. If Trump wins internationally, the view on the US will drastically change no matter what. But I think if Hillary becomes president, it will very much depend on what happens with Syria, what happens with Russia, what happens with international trade agreements.
Now, you mentioned domestic policies, of course. Georgia, you're interested in current affairs, I know, because you're on my bulletin team.
Yes, I am.
Obviously, Obama is famous for having his hands tied by both Congress and the Senate, being overrun by a Republican majority.
Absolutely.
To what extent has this inhibited him from making the changes that he wanted? And should we give Hillary another, well, I guess if we're viewing Hillary as a continuation of Obama, should we give Hillary the chance to continue that when her hands will also be tied by Congress and by the Senate, and she will also have the same problems as Barack Obama for at least the next year or so?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Congress has been a huge hand tire to Barack Obama and everything that his government have tried to do. I think he came in with so many people had such big expectations of what he could do that he could never possibly meet it just because of the way the government system works in America. There's no way that he could have met those expectations. I think we've seen it with his gun laws that he's tried to push through Congress several times, and the Republicans have just rejected it every time. I think we've seen it in Obamacare, the way that they forced him to change his original plans so drastically to what it's kind of come out as now. I think the way it's worked, government in America doesn't seem to be working really anymore because no one can get anything through. No drastic changes can be made because the checks and balances are kind of not working. And I think Hillary is just going to experience the same, that it's likely that if the Democrats get in, that then the Republicans will be in Congress, and it's just going to be a repeat of history, really. I don't think much will change.
George, with regards to foreign policy, of course, Obama has had a bit of a mixed bag when it comes especially to the Middle East. And lots of people will have said that, or justified, in many people's opinion, that Obama has been quite indecisive with regards to his Middle Eastern policy, and he's left the region in a lot of turmoil, most notably in Syria. His record there hasn't been great. And obviously a key proponent, or a key, benefactor from this situation has been Vladimir Putin. And Donald Trump has explicitly expressed his admiration for Vladimir Putin. Is Donald Trump the person that America needs to perhaps rectify the situation in the Middle East?
I mean, no. I think that's the worst idea, but that's my personal preference. I think what it comes down to is it's a clear fight, sort of hegemonic fight between the powers of the world, and Obama's lack of or ability to get involved in those things. You could see that with Ukraine. You could say was actually sort of shows evidence of America's sort of weakening power on the world stage and Russia's increased power. I think if Donald Trump does get the job, then we're just going to see that Russia is going to become more and more important because they're friends. I don't feel like the world should be feeling very comfortable right now because Russia's only going to grow stronger and America weaker. So no, I'm a bit worried about that one.
Sorry, Alicia.
Oh, that's all right. I was going to move on from foreign policy to domestic policy. Obamacare was kind of a big thing. Was that successful? Obviously, it's kind of been sort of mixed opinions about it because so many people now have insurance that previously didn't, but also prices have risen, insurance premiums have gone up. Do you think overall it's been successful?
I think it has been a successful start for a huge improvement in healthcare in the U.S. I mean, 20 million people more are now insured. Insurance has gotten cheaper overall. Insurance has gotten more widely available. You can now get insured even if you're not rich. You can get insured even if you have a record of illnesses. So I think that is a good beginning. But I think in order to continue on that streak, Obama is banking, Obama needs a successor that will continue on that streak. A beginning has been made, but it will take years, if not longer, to really establish a firm healthcare system in the U.S.
I think it's hard to sort of make a decision on Obamacare yet. And I mean, if Donald Trump gets in, then we can probably say it's going to be a failure.
Not a fan of that.
No, it's not. So it's going to go and it will be a failure. So I think it's all dependent on that, whether Obamacare is going to be a success or not. Because if Donald Trump gets in, he's just going to slam it down and that'll be it. So it all comes down to what happens this evening.
Yeah, it does indeed. Big night tonight.
Indeed. Big night. In more ways than one, I can assure you. Georgia. Is Obamacare more so, was Obamacare more so a social policy than I guess, economic policy, health policy, that sort of thing? Was it more of Obama, I guess, appealing to the more socialist-leaning avenue of the Democrats Party?
I think so. I mean, obviously it's had a huge economic impact. It's taken a lot of the taxpayers' money. But I think it probably was designed to kind of attract the more socialist side of the population. It has done a lot of good, I think, for the poorer communities that just couldn't access healthcare, that couldn't get treatment that they needed. They'd have to sell their homes to access healthcare sometimes. And I think it has done a lot in terms of social policy. It may have, I think it will take time to tell, but it may have slightly closed the gap on maybe the rich-poor divide. I don't know. I think it'll take time to tell. But I think more of a social policy than economic, although it's definitely impacted both sides.
It has been very divisive, let's not forget that. I mean, and Obama, as we alluded to earlier on, especially when it comes to race and race riots, he has left the country in a very divided state. There's no two ways about it. How difficult will it be? We're sort of segueing into, I guess, Obama's legacy and what
what's he going to do next?
Yes, exactly.
What's he going to do?
Exactly.
You mean when he's not president anymore?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. A lot of people, obviously,
each president has sort of this project that they embark
Yeah.
on after their presidency, and there has been some speculation that Obama's might be climate change and renewable energy. That sort of avenue that he might return to Chicago, but maybe it will be racial tensions and focusing on, you know, bringing the American society together more on that subject.
Well, on the subject of, I guess, what presidents do afterwards, here is a little bit of an obituary for the late President Barack Obama, in a metaphorical sense, obviously.
But he won't even follow him to the cave where he lives.
Persistent fly I've ever seen.
All of you know who I am. I'm sorry. Who's that back there? What the heck are you talking about? And we've got free speech in this country, which is great too.
Mr. President, have you looked at your pension? Have you looked at your pension?
I've got to say.
Mr. President, have you looked at your pension?
You know, I don't look at my pension. It's not as big as yours, so it doesn't
Well,
take as long.
let me give us.
I have no more campaigns to run. My only agenda, I know because I won both of them. In terms of the Democratic vote coming up, I'm going to let the voters cast their ballots and not try to meddle in the few primaries that are remaining. Let the process play itself out. We'll know soon enough. It's not going to be that much longer.
Well, I mean, how to follow on from that, ladies and gentlemen, I have no idea, but we'll do our best anyway. We have now got a new panel, so welcome new panelists, but also we'll be segueing to the Roundup Room, which is a brand new innovation that we've introduced here at XMedia, and it is a bunch of panelists who will be looking at a bit of the nuts and bolts of what is going on throughout the election and, you know, what all the stats mean, how to decipher them, all that sort of jargon. So over to you now at the Roundup Room.
Hello and welcome to the Roundup Room. I'm Emily. And we're going to be talking to you a bit about the presidential election. So, despite the unorthodox election, it's quite similar to the 2012 election with 32% Republican and 37% Democrat. There's also a record level among the college-educated voters, 50-50, with the non-college-educated voters, considering that college-educated white women outnumber the non-college-educated white women. This plays into Clinton's favour as college-educated white women are the strongest demographic for her.
Earlier, Colorado's voting system collapsed for 29 minutes. The cause is still under investigation, but is currently back online. Despite the initial edge for Clinton, according to Fox News' exit poll, 62% of voters said Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server during her time as Secretary of State bothered them, with 37% saying that it did not.
Meanwhile, 71% say that Donald Trump's treatment of women bothered them, with only 28% saying that it didn't.
Surprisingly, George W. Bush and Laura Bush have been reported as voting for Clinton today, according to the Conservative radio host Rush Limbaugh.
So that is all from us from the Roundup Room at this time. Come with us back with us in an hour, and we will tell you more of what's going on. Thank you very much.
Allegio is one of my favourites.
An issue that has been left surprisingly untouched during the campaign is the Black Lives Matter. And whilst Donald Trump has been calling Mexicans racist and claimed that refugees are all from ISIS, very little has been said by either campaign regarding the issue of racism in America, despite the waves of protests that swept across the US last year. Joining us here, we have Badara Jeng, Aleo Black, and Satchel Khan.
Hello.
Why hasn't this issue got more attention?
Well, I think it's an issue that's kind of easy to ignore because both parties are kind of complicit in it.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier for some issues to be prioritised more than others if one party can really make a stab at it. But it's hard for the Republicans to attack the Democrats on it because obviously Democrats are the party that's traditionally been good at this sort of thing. Whereas the Republicans can't. It's the Democrats really that it's under Obama that the Black Lives Matter movement has risen. So I think that's got to be a factor on it.
I think Trump's been very quick to blame all the sort of brutality and the violence that's come out of Black Lives Matter on Black Lives Matter itself, rather than the instances of police brutality. Has been very quick to label them as thugs. But conversely, I think Clinton has found that she herself has very little to say. I think there was a memoir that was leaked, which sort of, in which Clinton's campaign team told her to take a step back and not really say anything about Black Lives Matter, which really sort of shows how little either campaign really cares about them.
I don't think it's that simple. I think, it is an election year. You know, it is politics. It is hard to satisfy the need of the people that believe in the Black Lives Matter movement, whilst at the same time trying to honor police officers and not, marginalize them. So there's this weird dichotomy of how do you, as a politician, appeal to the black community, whilst at the same time appealing to those conservatives who have an affiliation, and love for, country and service and people that serve them. So I think that's why perhaps the way the candidates have tackled the issue is a bit sketchy, if you will.
But I mean, but not tackling it at all is different to at least tackling it.
I think Hillary has tried. I think she has tried. She has. She's, they've mentioned it a couple of times in the debates, I think only twice. And she gave a decent politician's response to it. I think Donald Trump, on the other hand, has kind of just given a weird, ranting, messy up an answer to most of, those questions. But I think Hillary has done her best. But at the end of the day, it is politics. So, you can't separate politics out of it because it's just not realistic.
Yeah, definitely. It's not really politically expedient for either party to challenge it because, a lot of voters are blaming the victims on it. A fair number aren't, of course, but, not enough for it to be, worth challenging, if you see what I mean there.
Can you just break down the Black Lives Matter movement? Because if we kind of just launched into it without really kind of explaining exactly what it is.
I just see it as a group of people that are just trying to make people acknowledge that in life, in general, we all have biases, and if you can acknowledge that, then when you're in a situation where, you're faced with that bias, you can at least say, you know what, this is my bias. You kind of separate that. So I think if you've got a bias and then you give the person a gun and you put them in an extreme situation or a situation that's not extreme at all, but because the person has a bias, then it automatically complicates the whole situation. So I think it's all about the Black Lives Matter movement is basically just trying to say, hey, there's an issue, we've all got biases, the police, some of it all have biases, some don't know how to handle it. I think that's basically the essence of what they're trying to do.
Although I think with that, they use that to branch that out into a much bigger point because there is, I don't think the issue just lies in personal biases with the police. I think there's an institutional structure which allows police, like if it was just an individual bias, you'd see the officers being reprimanded for the things that they've done, whereas they've not really been punished for any of the unarmed black people that they have been killing.
Yeah, like,
that's essentially what Black Lives Matter is about.
Like if you take the case of, the best example of that is taking the case of Eric Garner, who was murdered by police officers in New York. And they choked him, and he was being very clear that he couldn't breathe and that he was unarmed. And the officer who was, and it was filmed, and the officer who was responsible for it got completely away with it, but the person who filmed it, he got sent to jail. Like, there's something deeply wrong there.
I know you are an American footballer.
Yes, that's right.
Now, interestingly enough, American football has played a prominent role in this whole, I guess, segment, because Colin Kaepernick has been kneeling during the national anthem, which, of course, many people, including Donald Trump, one of the candidates, has come out and deeply criticized. He tweeted and he said, right, you can either respect the national anthem or get out, or something along those lines. You know, those aren't my words, but his. How has this come about, first of all? That's the first part of the question. Second part is, how influential and important is this to the outcome of the election? Because American football is such an important part of American culture.
Yeah, look, I'm not a 49ers fan. That's the team that the person mostly responsible for this, Colin Kaepernick, plays for. But I love him. Like, what he's been doing is fantastic. He's kneeling during the national anthem, and he did it for 2 weeks of pre-season and nobody noticed. But the media eventually caught on to it, and since then he's lost sponsorship deals. He didn't play for the first few weeks, although that's largely because he's not as good as he once was. But and he's received death threats for it, but he's just been absolutely fantastic. Like, on the death threats, there was the whole point of it. The main point of Black Lives Matter is to protest police brutality and the shootings, obviously, of unarmed, innocent black people. And one of the games that the 49ers, his team, played, they were selling shirts with his face on them with, like, a crosshairs, and his face in the middle of the crosshairs. So, like, they are protesting his point and proving his point by doing it. But as for how influential it is, like, football is a very, very influential sport, but if you look at social media when he's doing it, it's a lot against him. It's just horrific, some of the things that people are saying about Colin Kaepernick, really.
Personally, I think that when you have a news cycle wherein it's so easy for you to move on from one event to another and another and another, it's really important for people to keep this conversation going. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of celebrities who've spoken out about Black Lives Matter and have done things for Black Lives Matter, that's where they've done something right. It's not that they've just done it once as a publicity stunt, it's that people keep on doing it and then that conversation stays in the mainstream. I think that's...
It is important to note that it is now that people have now continued to do it, and more people are now doing it. There are cheerleaders doing it, there are American footballers doing it. People, during public gatherings, they kneel during the national anthem as a mark of protest.
And people who do it absolutely have to be commended for it, because there have been reports of college players and high school players who have been told that they're not going to play if they do it, and that can be a big deal. Like Brandon Marshall, the Jets receiver, he's lost millions of dollars of sponsorship because of it. There was a team who were told that anybody, they were told over the, like, an intercom system. It was a high school team, so we're talking about teenagers, young teenagers here. They were told that anybody who knelt during the national anthem should be shot. Like, these people who do this, who have the courage to do this, absolutely need to be commended for it. That's what I think. And like Satchel said, the fact that it's happening week in, week out, that's what's really making it so powerful.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, the reason why this is an issue is because of this weird double standard / hypocrisy, especially from the Republican Party. I mean, they keep touting the Second Amendment, but I think along the way they kind of forgot the First Amendment. Like, everyone has the right to protest. You don't have to like the way I protest, the way you protest, but you can respect the fact that that's your right to protest. People died for you to have that right to protest, you know? And I think throughout history, be it the civil rights movement or whatever, whenever people come out to protest, they always get labeled as thugs or gangsters or, people that should be literally at the bottom of your shoe or whatever. So for me, I just think it's just a massive hypocrisy. I don't have to like the way you protest, but I can respect the fact that it's your First Amendment right and you're not hurting anybody, you're just kneeling for the national anthem.
Yeah.
Satchel, how have we come to this situation now where we've had 8 years of the first African-American president, big jubilation, big mark of, I guess, this finally that we have this empowerment of African-Americans. How can we have this deeply divided context where Black Lives Matter is such an important issue and police brutality against African-Americans continues to plague the United States?
Arguably worse gotten worse.
Well, I've been reading a lot about this lately, about the concept of cognitive closure, and I've watched a documentary by Adam Curtis called Hypernormalization. It's sort of about the same concept. I think there's a massive disconnect between people who become public figures and they are esteemed for who they represent, and the influence of the power and wealth that they hold. And people say that, oh, you are the first African-American president. Now that in itself, that's a huge achievement. But going on from there, you have to recognize where that power and wealth is going. Now, Obama's administration deported, I think, the largest number of people that have ever been deported from America. It has conducted wars in Syria and Afghanistan, although they did pull out under Obama's administration. Exactly. And I think
they didn't go to war in Syria. Who went to war in Syria?
They've authorized drone strikes in Syria.
Yeah,
but they haven't put.
But 700 times more drone strikes Obama has authorized. That's quite.
Yeah, I guess.
96% of the victims of drone strikes are innocent.
Precisely. I think there's a massive. Obviously, I mean, it's kind of begging the obvious to say there's a massive divide between what politicians say and what they do. But Adam Kurtz's documentary describes a situation where no politician really looks towards the future. What politics is mainly about is trying to sort of keep a stable state where you try and bring everything back to this safe place instead of try and look to the future for new solutions to problems that exist. And so what ends up happening is that people become really inward-looking, and nothing really gets done. In the 8 years of Obama's presidency, nothing really, whether or not that was his own fault, nothing really was done. I watched a video lately where somebody who was interviewed when Obama was elected, and at the time she was crying, she was jubilant. Yeah. And at the moment she's just disappointed because Obama, either he chose not to or he wasn't able to accomplish any major milestones for African American people, and that's why I think now more so than ever, especially with Black Lives Matter and all the shootings happening at the same time, they are very, very disenfranchised with the way politics is going. And then you have Trump, obviously. So, I mean, it's a mix and match.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been like, a year and a half since Garner was killed, and longer since Trayvon Martin, and there's been no inquest. Can you imagine the public reaction if George W. Bush had failed to produce an inquest in that time?
First of all, the leader of the free world can't be going into every single court case and dealing with that. It just doesn't happen. And secondly, I think this whole idea that President Obama perhaps hasn't done that much for the black community over his 8-year term, the 2 terms he's had. Let's put it in perspective, okay? We've had 42 white male presidents, yeah? If we have to, for whatever reason, hold them to this standard, to hold those presidents to this standard that they should have helped white, middle class / working class men in America. And if they had done their job properly, then we wouldn't have had Trump right now, who is, capitalizing of, these working class people who feel disenfranchised, who feel left behind. So you can't just say, just because it's been there for 8 years, that you expect him to have changed the entire system. It just doesn't work that way. And secondly, Kind of lost my train of thought. But yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you just said that President Obama was the first black president, and potentially tonight we might actually have the first female president, which brings us on to women, which we're going to talk a little bit about because they do make up half of this campaign. So to join us to talk about that, we have got a committee member of FemSoc, Bea Phones, who is going to hop onto our sofa and we're going to chat a little bit about it because it's been quite controversial. We've got...
Hello, Bea.
Oh, here she is. And she's right. Magic. How are you doing?
Good, very well, thank you.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, I think something that's been quite profound in this campaign is the use of women as actually a political weapon. On both sides of the campaign, women have been used, whether it's with the sexual assault when he brought in the woman who was supposedly sexually assaulted by Bill Clinton, or on obviously Hillary's side with the whole kind of grab her by the thing.
How significant would the first female president in the United States be, in your opinions, Bea?
I think it's very easy in this situation to fall into the narrative of identity politics, of saying, yes, it would be brilliant to have the first female president. It would, but a win for Hillary Clinton isn't necessarily a win for feminism. Because on the one hand, yes, she has been very supportive, for example, Planned Parenthood. She has spoken about Black Lives Matter and obviously a lot about, we would term under kind of the umbrella of women's issues. But on the other hand, her actions as Secretary of State and her association with this very kind of second wave feminism that it's not a feminism for all women in America. It's not representative of all people in America. And the idea that this kind of very white elitist idea of women's rights could be the thing that gets Hillary Clinton elected, I think could be very damaging. When on the one hand you have a woman who is speaking out saying that all victims of sexual assault need to be listened to, need to be respected, and yet consistently defends her husband against allegations of sexual abuse, who kind of put pressure on Juanita Broaddrick to drop her charges, resulting in that one then campaigning for Trump. I think it's a very dangerous situation that Hillary Clinton's main strength is probably not Trump.
Are you saying that she's sort of Hillary might only be speaking to a certain class, a certain race, and then leaving out a whole other bunch of people in her kind of feminist?
Yes, I mean, I think that obviously as a surface issue after having kind of 43 male presidents, there is kind of this notion of it would be a great jump for social justice, a great jump for feminism. The kind of the reason that so many, I think, working class young women, young people in general, there was this kind of wave of support for Bernie Sanders, was because there's simply not provisions from Hillary Clinton, despite her coming forward as an advocate of women's issues. She, for example, in terms of LGBT rights, which also hasn't been enormously discussed throughout the campaign, Hillary Clinton has spoken about ending conversion therapy, which says something that Trump's VP Pence actually funds. That is a step, but it's not enough. It's not something that is addressed enough, and Hillary Clinton definitely does not. She does not speak for women of color. She does not speak for trans women. There's a whole host of people who would not at all say that Hillary Clinton represents them, even though they are the people that she is claiming to speak most for.
Yeah.
I think you simply have to look at her record to realize the difference between what she says, what she espouses, and what she actually means. Mm-hmm. That her definition of women isn't really, it's not all women. It's a very narrow idea of what women are. She poured support into the coup in Honduras, after which I think violence against LGBT individuals soared. Obviously, as Secretary of State, she was heavily involved in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya as well, I think, which displaced families, displaced women, killed women, killed families. And
of course, those places are now very peaceful as well.
Yeah, one would say. And I mean, I was reading about her book, and in which she, like, I wasn't reading the book itself. I don't think I would put my money there. But I was reading about her book, in which she brags about cutting welfare from, I think, I'm not quite sure of the percentages, but it was by 40% of something, from 70 to 30%, but I'm not sure of what, so I'm not going to pretend like that statistic is worth anything. But the basic idea of it was she was bragging about cutting welfare, which was going to families, which was going to children, going to women, and you have to be very wary of what somebody represents and what somebody actually does. Yeah.
I think the question itself is misleading and kind of damaging in a way, that she could be the first female president, because a lot of Hillary Clinton's campaign has been about that. But saying that is to erase, like, over a century of women in politics.
Yeah.
Not just white women either, but women of colour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, there's been women of colour who have almost made the Democrat nomination, Republican nomination. There's been plenty of women who have done similar, not just women of colour, but women of colour. And this is what Clinton is erasing by making the point about how she is the archetypal female politician.
She is the essential woman for America.
And a lot of those women would have been much better for women than Hillary Clinton.
Why do you think that Hillary has been the first female sort of in the running when it comes down to for the presidency? Is this an issue of institutionalized sexism? Is it a lack of role models in the political sphere, female role models?
I think you have to take into account a long history of really tumultuous socio-political change. Obviously, she has a big record as Secretary of State, as Bill Clinton's wife, and obviously for all the things that she's done in her positions. She's always sort of been in a position of power, like before she was in politics, or maybe during, I'm not sure, but between 1986 and 1992, I think, she served on the board for Walmart. While they were campaigning against trade unionists, by the way, but she was serving on the board because she is friends with, what's the family's name? The Walton family, who own Walmart. And I think so it helps that she's always maintained a sort of a level of power. I think perhaps Barack Obama's election perhaps maybe assisted in sort of...
in a way, there's she's benefiting from the definite dynasty system that exists in American politics. Like, it was very nearly Clinton against Bush.
Oh, yeah.
Which would have been...
Exactly.
Interestingly, sorry to interrupt
all right.
there, but you talked earlier on about sorry, I was going to say something. You talked a little bit earlier about Hillary Clinton not being representative of all women in politics, and interestingly, a lady who has very much come out and been very, very popular with regards to women and empowering women has been Michelle Obama, and she's been very influential. She's one of the most influential ladies in the United States at the moment. Can we expect her to run for president in the future?
I think I've heard a lot of people say I think our problems would be solved if Michelle Obama would run. But I think that part of the reason that Michelle Obama has been so popular is in all her speeches when she's coming out kind of in support of her husband, now in support of Hillary Clinton. Like, she is accessible in that she knows that she is already in a position of power. She is in a position where she can speak to large crowds, she can be very influential, and she is accessible because the student, often I see a lot of videos kind of her addressing kind of university groups.
And she runs a very successful education program as well for young girls, which obviously has had a huge success throughout the United States. Yeah,
and I think that kind of the nature of the fact that kind of the Obama family kind of units public image has been very much kind of like there's not been kind of personal scandals, unlike with many previous presidents. I think that when you have people who the public kind of trust, whose public face they see as kind of very accessible, it's far preferable than this kind of very homogenous image of kind of Hillary Clinton and her supporters. When you have people like Madeleine Albright, who was the kind of the first female Secretary of State, coming out and saying, or there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. Not all women are Hillary Clinton, and not all women have the opportunities and are able to kind of ride the Clinton train into power, as I feel and a lot of others very much feel she has done. Obviously, she kind of is very divisive, but when someone has an opponent like Donald Trump, there's so little you can do, because in reality, I do think the kind of protest votes or voting for different candidates, it is a vote for Trump. And I think a lot of women in America would want to vote for another candidate out of kind of like their own personal morals. And when it comes down to sacrificing your principles for the sake of your human rights, which I feel is a line that a lot of women must have taken after Donald Trump's absolutely atrocious behaviour. I think we all thought it was very funny when he announced he was going to be running. It's not funny anymore. And there's a very real chance that kind of the progress that women from all backgrounds and LGBT individuals, the progress, like admittedly slow, that has been seen in kind of like last decade or so, will slow or be reversed completely. Like from what we've heard from Trump, there's no doubt in my mind, at least, that any vote not for Trump is a vote in the right direction, if not the best possible direction.
I think Hillary as well, she's used kind of her womanness, almost capitalised on her media campaigns, which is something we're going to be looking at later. Do you think this has kind of worked for her? Do you think that she's exploited it to a degree?
That's an interesting question. I think any image, I think both politicians have used an image to push themselves. Like Donald Trump obviously did this whole nostalgic, we're going to go back to the 1950s thing, we're going to make everything better. And I think Hillary's way into it, it's really strange. She's pushed this sort of like, kind of sort of feminized, like I know what it means
like
to
I'm
be a
with her.
woman. Yeah, like I'm with her kind of an image. But I think it comes into the same issue of representation again, like what does she mean by woman? Who is she addressing?
Yeah.
And the fact is, when she does that, she is addressing a very narrow audience. And I think it sort of speaks to a level of, I think, ignorance about the state of about the reality maybe of America's population, America's working class voters, America's women of color, America's transgender women.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton's probably going to be very good for middle-class, white, cis women in the United States and other Western countries.
Yeah. So that's what you mentioned there, the hashtag I'm with her campaign, which is just one of many different kind of political media campaigns and strategies that have been used. And we're going to have a look at a few more, and these have obviously been incredibly influential.
They have.
So here's kind of a summary of the different ad campaigns that we've seen so far.
The 2016 United States presidential election is probably one of the ugliest seen in a long while. And there is much in the campaigning of the two candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, that reflects this, focusing less on policy than on character assassination to an unprecedented degree.
The establishment, the media, the special interest, the lobbyists, the donors, they're all against me.
Donald Trump has marketed himself as an outsider to the levers of power, a fighter for the common man, while simultaneously embodying an all-American success story of wealth and power. Despite wealth and power largely being funded by his mogul father, and despite numerous occasions of financial blunders, it's clearly an image that resonates.
I made a tremendous amount of money.
Building on this, Donald has used Hillary Clinton's decades worth of work in the public service against her, drawing on both the legacy and controversies of her husband, former President Bill Clinton, and of course current scandals to cement her in the public eye as an embodiment of the establishment and an elitist force incapable of change.
Hillary Clinton won't change Washington. She's been there 30 years. A vote for Hillary is a vote for more of the same.
Revelations such as Clinton being offered $675,000 Dollars from Goldman Sachs for free speeches was jumped on by the GOP as examples of her intrinsic ties to big business. Currently, the biggest controversy hitting Hillary, less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, is the reopening of the FBI's investigation regarding the use of a private email address during her time as Secretary of State. It's not hard to see then just why Trump's nickname for Clinton, Crooked Hillary, has stuck.
They're not controlled by the special interests, by the lobbyists, and they control Crooked Hillary.
Careless, reckless, crooked.
Despite Clinton being rated overwhelmingly higher for truer statements, Trump's ads market him as tough on immigration, with many focusing on the potential dangers for crime which illegal immigrants may bring.
The man who murdered Joshua is an illegal alien, and he should not have been here.
In addition, fear-mongering over political situations in the Middle East and questioning Clinton's successes in dealing with them helps differentiate Trump with his hardline stance towards geopolitics. Clinton returns the favor, focusing on pointing out Donald Trump's inflammatory stances towards immigrants.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Minorities.
Total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
More accusers coming forward to say they were sexually assaulted by Donald Trump.
In an attempt to link disparate groups, centrists, Sanders supporters, and even Republicans, over a fear of Trump. Whilst Trump attacks this, nonetheless, Clinton also markets herself on her experience and achievements in the public service by emphasizing equality for women, LGBTQ+ rights, and a pro-migration.
Yes, welcome back here to our coverage of the US presidential election here on XTV and Xpression FM and Exepose online. Some breaking news for you coming up now. There have been reports of a shooting in California. 2 people have been reported to be injured, and a polling station is on lockdown. That's relating to a polling station. So there have been shots fired at a polling station. So we'll keep you up to date on that story. Hopefully nobody is hurt. And on that somber note, I should say, I will introduce our panel. We will be discussing, I guess, the more light-hearted topic of ads in the media. So I'd like to introduce Jason, Jack, and Sam. Good evening to you. How are you this evening?
Good.
Good. Well done. Well done. Thank you. So, ads in the media. So, the presidential candidates have spent so much money. They've spent billions on ads. I mean, just a few of the stats to roll out for you. A total of $1.1 billion has been spent on cable TV ads. A total of $6 billion has been spent on broadcast TV adverts. That's an awful lot of money. Jason, will it make a difference? Why are people willing to spend so much money on media coverage and TV adverts?
Well, I think the most interesting thing is Donald Trump only started his funding his TV campaign ads towards like the last 12 weeks towards the campaign, and it just shows he can just say ridiculous things and still get on TV without even the funding. So I think the most important thing to realise is that you don't need money essentially to get heard, especially with today's social media outlets.
So would you go as far to say that his early statements such as "let's build a wall," such as "I propose a complete and utter shutdown of all Muslims entering the United States," were more free publicity stunts as opposed to concrete policies that he wanted to pursue in the future?
I mean, I do think he's ridiculous, but I do think it's quite a clever campaign strategy. I think it's quite tactful to say things that he knows will get into the news.
Sam, Hillary has, I guess, stressed this fact that she is very caring, that she wants to care for America. She's, I guess, almost adopting this image of a caring mother of the United States. Is this something that she can genuinely sell to the people, or is this something that American voters are going to find quite difficult to...
I think it's interesting, wasn't it? Because I think Trump's support has this real masculinist element to it. You know, it's all about wanting an alpha male, a strong man, and that's why they admire Putin so much as well. You know, so on one hand you've got this kind of alpha male beating his chest, and then you've got the caring mother, like you say. I think Hillary's campaign will appeal more to the young voters, well, many young voters, and indeed some older voters. I think the thing that in my view, the most damaging thing for Trump's campaign was the...
Sam, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there. We've had some more information regarding the shooting at the California polling station. There has been one confirmed death, so we're very sad to report one confirmed death, and 4 people are now injured from that report at a polling station in California. More to come on that story as it develops. Sorry, Sam. We were saying earlier, and Jack, I want to bring you into this as well. Donald Trump has spent relatively little when it comes to his ad campaign and that sort of thing, as has been highlighted by the previous candidates. Can Hillary genuinely just buy herself the election in this implicit sort of way? Does the richest candidate always win because of the media bias?
I've actually been watching a few of the trailers and advertisements, and it's just so different to the UK, unbelievably different. You know, if you look at the BBC, how we do campaigning here, I could be wrong, I think it's about £100,000 cap. They're not allowed to sort of go and infiltrate our TVs, you know, in our homes. That's what's so damaging in these situations, because you're infiltrating into the home. You know, there's enough we see on social media, which is another huge different section to talk about, that has been had such an impact in this election, especially for young people. But I feel with the TV adverts themselves, they're just so over dramatic. It's like life or death. It's and I think the word that comes to mind when I think of this election is polarizing, because you've got Trump, and the way that he's got to the position he has is he has branded her as such an establishment figure, so much so that he's just, whatever he says is a brighter outcome because he's a normal human being. I think what's really, really important to remember about this is he may be claiming to be, you know, the people's voice, but is the people's voice really coming from someone who is a billionaire, you know, self-made, whatever? To working class people, I'm not sure that rings true. So there's a bit of irony underneath that, I think, that needs to be explored.
You're saying you've watched some of the ads for so many like smear campaigns. Like all the ads, they're just attacking one another. There's not really kind of like a positive, progressive message of their own. 100%. Do you think that is something that speaks to people then? Do you think that works?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like what's happened here is this campaign has just become about the lesser evil, as I'm sure you discussed already, but so much so that it's becoming to a point where it's all about hate rather than really embracing, like, you know, what candidates are better for good reasons rather than he's homophobe or whatever, you know. So I feel like it has created such a negative, almost toxic atmosphere that has surrounded this whole campaign, which is something that I feel the Republican Party in particular will look to change in the next election, especially if Trump doesn't get this one in the bag.
Jack, you mentioned social media campaigns. Sam, both of you, have you got kind of are there any standout things that have sort of defined both of their social media campaigns? Do you think they've been good? They've worked well?
I think Trump's utilisation of Twitter has been quite interesting, especially as he doesn't seem to have any filter at all, and doesn't seem to be reprimanded by it, by his party, by his election campaign. I think it's a new way of getting to people directly, and also through using social media, which of course people use at home. He kind of shows that he's one of us, which is obviously not true, but he appears to show that he has the same interests at heart. And it's a very direct way. I mean, tweeting at 2 a.m. is not something I would recommend to any candidate, but he seems to do it anyway.
Yeah. We've just actually got some breaking news. Some results are in. It's so exciting. Kentucky and Indiana have gone to Trump, and Vermont, that's not a state. Vermont is a state, and that's gone to Clinton. So that's Kentucky and Indiana have gone to Trump, and Vermont has gone to Clinton. And polls are now closing in South Carolina and Florida, so results for those will be coming in imminently.
Big swing states as well.
Yeah, big ones. Florida is a massive one. That's going to determine a lot, I think, this evening. So those are coming up, which is quite exciting. But let's get back to our conversation. Sorry to cut you off there. We were talking about the amount of money that goes into these campaigns, which is just obscene. But a candidate who, and also the nature of the donations, the massive donations from donors, business, corporations. Bernie Sanders has kind of been an anomaly in that sense. I think his average donation was something like $27.
It was very low. It was very low, and it was largely from individuals as well.
Yeah.
It was also from what I distance him from the rest.
And that, I mean, he didn't obviously win the nomination, but he did well against Clinton. Do you think that could maybe start a trend that could happen in the future, or do you think that was a complete anomaly that will kind of happen and we'll forget about that?
I think there's definitely this new move toward, I mean, you know, we can't see like politics as happening in isolation type of thing. It's like it makes use of the current social norms. And there's these comparisons between Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn. Much Bernie Sanders is infinitely better than Jeremy Corbyn in every possible way. It's true that they both did fund a lot of money from crowdfunding. Like Corbyn's campaign made loads of money from individuals through Facebook, through Twitter, and Sanders did the same thing. And it was by tapping into, both of them appeal to younger voters, both of them appeal to this so-called anti-establishment ideal. People who are always on social media, who are casually involved in some ways, one could say, with politics, and get it more through, small bites of information, and happy to give £2 or £3, as opposed to appealing to, these big corporations, super PACs, these kind of things. So there's definitely this new mode of,
I think as well, maybe something with that, the reason why Bernie was so popular, maybe, it's quite easy to generalise, but traditionally younger people have more optimism. And so with this whole idea that the world is the way it is, you're not really as far left as you go on the spectrum, you're not really going to make a massive change. But I think that's why Bernie was so popular, especially with the younger voters, because the sense of optimism that you can change the way that America is. America wouldn't necessarily vote for him if he had got the nomination. I'm not saying that, but I feel that's a big divide that is quite important as well.
I mean, now Sanders has openly endorsed Clinton, though. Do you think that was a good move for him? It's kind of like he's kind of just abandoned everything that he stood for and been like, nah.
I mean, it's politics, like...
Yeah.
Again, it's like a lesser of two evils, really. Obviously, he didn't support her, and then he's changed, but for the sake of America, that's an example maybe of him putting his country before his self-interest.
Yeah.
But that might be a bit ironic to say for a politician, but I think that's why people have linked him so much to Jeremy Corbyn, is because he appeals again to young people, but also there's a sense that he's got a connection to people because he's offering, optimistic values rather than the traditional that you could argue Clinton represents.
Yeah, 100%. And we've heard from some lovely British young people, and now we're going to hear from some lovely American young people with this VT that is coming up for you with some opinions of some students in Virginia.
Today, we were at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, asking American university students how they feel about the current election. We asked them how closely they followed the election and how closely they plan to follow it on Tuesday.
I've watched all the debates and all the SNL parodies of the debates.
Pretty close. I've watched all the debates, and I'm going to watch the election probably. Haven't read a lot, but I've read about policies, but I haven't been reading all the drama and stuff.
I've just been following the news every day, mostly because it's kind of like a fun drama, right? I want to see what happens, who says what.
Don't follow it as closely because it's gotten annoying.
Pretty closely. I try to stay updated with those things. I will say it's been hard to kind of watch some of what's been going on. And I've practiced self-care by not watching certain things.
We asked them what's their view on the election so far.
I definitely think that it's kind of put us in a situation where we have to choose between two candidates that aren't necessarily the best for this country. I obviously think Hillary Clinton will do a much better job, and I think that you can recover from 4 years of a bad presidency, but you can't recover from 4 years of Donald Trump. Trevor Noah said that, so I'm not trying to steal his words.
I definitely think that people used to say that's always the lesser of two evils. I feel like that applies a lot to this election, mostly because there are so many negatives for each candidate, even before you get into policy, that it kind of becomes a question of who do you prefer on that policy side, or whose sins do you consider greater?
In all honesty, it's gotten a lot nastier than it needed to be, and there's a less focus on the issues in the actual politics that are involved in a democratic election, and there's a lot more character shaming. And while that's a natural part of our political party system, it's gotten to an excessive amount with this election.
So watching the debates, I am a little embarrassed that our country has come to this. It's kind of they're like kids. They're not really. It's been better.
This VT was from America. Yes, indeed. Breaking news for you there. Cutting edge analysis here from Xpression FM and XTV.
We've just had some news. Apparently South Carolina is too close to call. So although that is closed, apparently it's too close to call at the moment. So that
Indeed.
Fox News. That was Fox News who told us that.
Indeed.
Reliable source. Anyway, moving on. We are going to be talking about controversy as a political tactic, because this campaign has not been without controversy. It has been full of it. In the run-up to Brexit, let's bring this back to the UK a little bit. Michael Gove argued that they've had enough of the experts. To what extent do you think this is the case in this? We're kind of in this like post-fact society now. There's been like lies happening, fact-checking that's been proved wrong. Do you think that this kind of post-fact society is a thing?
I do. I think particularly in the lead up to Brexit, with all the signs on the buses saying about how much they were going to donate to the NHS, which obviously didn't happen, is just like a clear sign that we just clearly believe everything that politicians tell us, regardless of fact-checking or political know-how. And the fact that someone like Donald Trump can actually get into the political race without having any sort of political background or understanding, or any understanding, just proves that he shouldn't be a political candidate, and perhaps more research needs to be done.
I mean, Sam, do you think that this move to like a politics of kind of less concerned with truth is irreversible? Do you think there's any way back from this now?
No, I don't. To be blunt. It sounds very cynical. I can't see it changing because, like we were saying earlier, we've got this huge social media now. Like anyone can put anything online, and as a claim, and people don't fact check it. Like we've seen the amount of things going around this election, just some spurious claim about Clinton from a Trump supporter. It gets like 10,000 retweets or something. And by the time someone's seen that, it's too late to disprove it. And it's even like with the £350 million a week thing we sent to the EU, it wasn't true. But then whenever the Remain campaign came out and said, oh, actually it's £180 million a week, it's still, the core message was untouched. We send millions of pounds a week to the EU. So it's, we're in an age, we're talking about with 24-hour news, social media, BuzzFeed, all this kind of stuff, where it's more useful to make a claim and that's as outrageous as possible, and then your opponents kind of really begin to come back.
I'd just say maybe Trump has maybe highlighted maybe a fault in the whole US system, because his whole campaign is controversy. That is how he got to this stage. Before, when he announced his nomination, people didn't really think he was much of a threat at all, similar to Bernie in a way. But the way that he got on the stage and he's got to the point where he is controversy. The first thing that he said when he announced his running was the quote about Mexicans being rapists. That's what immediately got him in the media, and it's what getting his foot through the door at that stage that is pushed further and further. And you can argue all of the videotapes that have come out with the feminist critics against women, that although that's a bad thing for Trump, you can look at it and say, hang on a minute, maybe that's good for him, because the way his campaign is going, it's just opening more media doors, and CNN and Fox and all these places just lap it up and love talking about that, whereas I think maybe that's some of the comparison to the UK, where we pay for the BBC to be neutral. That's the point. America is so big that people don't want to pay for that. So the way that the campaign is going, Trump's facts are not true whatsoever, and that's how he's got his foot in the door.
I really do believe in today's society we rely more on personalities, especially with reality TV. And I think that's how Trump has got this far. He relies on personality. I do think even in previous campaigns with the Obamas, they do rely on their charisma and their reliability to be normal people to get them through the door. And I think that's almost slightly worrying as we don't look at.
Nevertheless, could the same be said about Hillary Clinton, for example? Could she not have maybe said during the debates, do you know what, I'm not going to talk about Donald Trump at all. I'm just going to talk about my policies and how much better they are than Donald Trump, because he has no policies, I have policies. And was it a mistake on her part that she decided to dedicate so much of her valuable time speaking to the nation by, I guess, slating Donald Trump, who many would have regarded as being a negative character anyway?
I do think it is quite disappointing, especially with referring to Trump's candidates as a basket of deplorables. I think was quite controversial because people expected her to retain this image of being quite unchallenged or unbothered by what was happening. But I do think you can only go so far as to not be bothered by someone calling you a witch and things like that.
That is very true. That is very true. It gets difficult to, I guess, not react to that sort of abuse, that sort of thing. But an interesting issue in which I guess they completely distance, they completely diverge, I should say, the two candidates, is the issue of immigration. Of course, Donald Trump has made this big claim about building a wall between the United States and Mexico, which I have to stress once again is already there. There is already a big barbed wire fence on the border between the United States.
That's not a wall, is it?
That is true. That is true. That is true. Nonetheless, there is a border there, and of course, Hillary Clinton has been much more, I guess, pro-immigration, much more, I guess, Obama-like in terms of her, and I guess much more, I guess, you would think European in her way of looking at this sort of thing. Sam, immigration, it's a massive issue, keeps cropping up every time when we come to elections, when we come to any sort of political debates. Is there a simple fix for the United States?
No, there's not. And I think the left have to look very seriously at the issue of immigration, because for the past 20, 30 years or so, we've kind of taken the attitude that any opposition in any form has to be motivated by racism. It has to be motivated by lack of education. Now, often it is. However, the problem is when you constantly tell people this for 30 years, and when anti-immigrant sentiment has always been held by a large proportion of the population, you do end up getting this kind of backlash. These people constantly talk about how they're left behind, all this kind of thing, that no one speaks for them. So then someone really absurd like Trump comes along and he does speak for them, so cool, because we haven't engaged in any kind of debate. And I think we saw that in Brexit. We're seeing that across the EU with all the rise of these nationalist parties, and we're seeing it in the US. So I'm not saying the left has to become an anti-immigrant force. Of course it shouldn't, but it has to change the way it speaks about immigration. To at least seem like it's listening to concerns.
We just had a bit of an update, actually. States have been coming in. Hillary is currently on 3, and Trump is on 19, I hear. So that's Hillary has taken 3 states, and Trump
is on 19. Yes, yeah. Those are just preliminary polls, I believe, so far. So we'll keep you updated on that while that, I guess, develops. So, guys, initial thoughts on that? What are we thinking? Hillary's on 3, Trump's on 19. Is this a sign of things to come?
I'm very glad I live in this country. Quite worrying. But yeah, I
think in the Obama election last time, the earlier state, I could be wrong, the earlier states traditionally were a Republican based.
More east,
yeah.
That kind of
Yeah. So what you saw with the Obama re-election is that you saw at the beginning quite a lot of Republican over Obama, and then eventually, as you get in the early hours, he suck. But so fingers crossed.
Yeah, we said that wrong. It's seats, not states, because of the system. Okay. So we're fine. It's okay. Well, it's not fine, but it might be fine. Anyway, we're going to talk about immigration again. That was interesting. The wall, okay, the wall. Everybody loves this idea of the wall. It was kind of funny at first, but he really believes in this wall. How possible are the things that he is actually stating and vowing to do? Is it just empty rhetoric, or are these things possible, do we think? Will they actually come to fruition?
I feel like there's a big divide that needs to be recognised between getting to the presidency and after. I was watching an interview today about, I think it was CNN, about how this is the easy stage. Saying rhetoric is fine. Getting into that position, fine. Dealing with the disunited nation after that, it's like a bad hangover. You've got a really disunited nation, and Trump especially has widened that gap. And I feel maybe even if Trump doesn't win, is there Trumpism after Trump in the same way that UKIP is? They've achieved their goal, all right, leaving the EU maybe, probably, but. Have they moved now the Conservatives to the right and for a hard Brexit? I don't know, maybe even if Trump doesn't win, will these anti-immigration policies remain within the frame of mind of the people?
Yeah, who knows?
Too close to call.
I think as well that was an interesting speaking, if Trump does win, I had a Slovakian philosopher talking about if Trump does win, it could be a good thing because it might inspire a political awakening and change will come. How do you guys respond to that? Do you think there's weight in that argument?
Complete nonsense. Slavoj always talks complete nonsense, and he's doing the same again. That's basically what I can say about that.
Okay.
Interestingly, I mean, it's interesting when talking about immigration because, of course, it's important to remember that the United States is originally a country of immigrants. You know, and the way you look at it now, both of these candidates are of European descent. You know, originally. So, I guess if you were a Native American and you were sort of looking at this and you were looking at, I guess, immigration as being flagged up, would you feel a little bit hard done by, to say the least?
I feel like it's a hot topic.
Yeah,
I don't know, like it's very controversial. Maybe as well with Farage, the impact he's had here. I know that he was called over by Trump. Maybe he's seen inspiration from Brexit and seen a hole in the market to pursue. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I want to go into
touchy subject. Maybe policy is a better thing to talk about. Policy on immigration, Hillary's has been it's kind of not been as kind of prominent as Donald's because there's been a lot of talk of that. Do you guys know anything about what Hillary plans, her plans on immigration policy?
I know she's a lot more. Sorry.
No, you go.
She's a lot more friendly. She's a lot more friendly towards refugees.
Yeah.
She has a genuine plan to take refugees, whereas obviously Trump's complete shutdown of all Muslims isn't really going to be very conducive to letting in Syrian refugees.
She's declared that about the whole no-fly zone in Syria.
Well, absolutely, the foreign policy side as well, of course. Yeah. I mean, Trump basically takes this isolationist attitude in his foreign policy and in his domestic policy. So it's basically kind of real nativist. Whereas obviously Hillary, I guess she's like a kind of Atlanticist hawk in the classic sense. She does see a space for the US to be a refuge for people seeking liberty and a force for it in the world. Whether you believe that is, going to be
well, we will see. And that's all got quite deep quite quickly, but something that is a bit lighter than that is food. We're going to be seeing a videotape from Tara who shows us how to make a cake to celebrate the night that is election night. Let's have a look. It's just gone midnight, which means it's time for James and I to say goodbye and to hand over the baton to Expose's Jack Morgan-Jones and to Xpression's Vidara Jeng as they take you through the next 2 hours of the show.
Indeed, it has been an absolute pleasure to host for you, and we have lots more history to be made tonight, so do stay tuned. Don't you go anywhere. I've been James Cunningham.
And I've been Alicia Pocock.
Have a lovely evening, and stay tuned here on XTV, Xpression, and Expose Online. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
Oh, dear me.
Welcome back to the Roundup. I am Lizzie.
And I'm Emily.
The latest, Trump has 13 votes and Clinton has 3.
And in other news, Donald Trump is expected to win Kentucky. In the southern states, Arizona has always voted Republican since 1954, with the only exception being 1966 with Bill Clinton. So could the other half of the Clinton marriage break the Republican streak again?
A shooting in California has forced stations to be shut down. At least 4 people have been injured and 1 person killed.
So Clinton's campaign has asked for an extended poll in the Durham County, North Carolina, due to equipment malfunctions earlier today.
And in Las Vegas, Trump campaigners have complained that the election officials allowed people to vote after the 8 p.m. violating state laws.
Discontent has also been concerned on social medias with new officials from with new citizens of America not being able to vote.
Trump's campaign manager has attacked Republicans on Twitter complaining from the Republican base.
Speculations have also risen on public media from Trump's campaigner, Kellyanne Conway, on the Chris Matthews show, regarding that Trump is prepared to address the results as he sees them tonight. This is all from us. We'll be back with you in an hour. Thank you very much. The correct number of states, apparently, from Trump is 19, and for Clinton it is 3. We will see you later.
Good morning, it's just gone midnight. I am your host, Vidara Jeng. I'm joined by Jax Morgan-Jones.
Hello, everybody.
For the next 2 hours, we'll be dissecting all the latest political news, trying to give you an insight into what they all mean. We'll also be trying to get a look into Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, trying to figure out who these people really are. We'll also be talking about the key swing states, dissecting all the key swing states, trying to find out which ones actually matter and which ones perhaps don't. And finally, we will also be talking about Bernie Sanders and the revolution that he has led over the last 2 years.
Excellent and exciting stuff. Joining us on our panel at the moment, we have Susanna from Expose, we have Ed Church, and we have Dominic Walmsley.
Nice to have you with us, guys. So over the last 2 years, we've seen the media, the general public, being completely enamored by the revolution that Donald Trump has created. And I feel like personally there's been another revolution that's perhaps not been covered as much, and that's probably the Bernie Sanders revolution. So I'm going to go to you, Ed. I guess my question to you is, what do you think led to the rise of the Bernie Sanders revolution, especially among the young people in America?